What she just said might completely flip everything you thought you knew about the Indiana fever and the tension behind the scenes. And yes, Sophie Cunningham has now entered the chat, with a take that no one expected. But before we break this all down, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because the drama unfolding in Indianapolis right now, it's on another level, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop. All right, here's what just happened. In a recent interview, Caitlin Clark finally opened up, and her comments are making waves across the WNBA. She openly stated that head coach Stephanie White pulled her out during a key matchup against the New York Liberty. And the explanation behind it? Absolutely shocking. This wasn't about preserving energy or tweaking the playbook. According to Clark, this was all about asserting control. Picture this. It's the fourth quarter and Clark is on fire, racking up assists, dropping buckets, running the offense with confidence. Then, out of nowhere, she commits back-to-back turnovers. What happens next? Stephanie White benches her instantly. But here's the twist. Clark said White described it as a learning moment. Seriously? We're talking about Caitlin Clark, the same player who transformed the college basketball scene with her insane court vision and highlight-worthy plays. When Caitlin talked about that benching moment, she wasn't angry. She actually smiled. Why? Because she gets what's going on behind the scenes. She shared a specific play. She grabbed a steal, they were out on the break, and Kelsey Mitchell was sprinting down the center lane. That's a prime opportunity for one of Clark's signature full-court assists. But instead of letting it fly, she held back, literally stopped herself from doing what she does best. And then, she glanced over at Coach White and basically said, "Do you realize how hard it was not to make that pass?" That right there shows you something seriously off in this coaching dynamic. This isn't just about a single benching. It's starting to look like a larger pattern, a deliberate effort to mold Caitlin Clark into a version of herself that fits within a rigid system. Think about it. This is one of the most electric rookies the WNBA has seen in years. She sells out arenas, drives massive viewership, and brings a style that fans love. And yet her coach is trying to dial her back? That's like telling Steph Curry to stop shooting from deep or asking LeBron to avoid the paint. It just doesn't make sense. And here's where things really take a wild turn. Apparently, during a recent game, Stephanie White was caught on a hot mic saying that Clark's time away from the court has been, get this, a blessing in disguise. That's right. According to White, having her star player sidelined was beneficial. She claimed it allowed other players to find themselves and made the team harder to scout. Seriously? Are we really supposed to believe that losing the league's most marketable and exciting player is somehow good for business? What she just shared might completely change your view of the ongoing drama inside the Indiana Fever's locker room. And wait until you hear what Sophie Cunningham had to say. Absolutely no one saw that coming. Before we dive into this whole saga, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what's happening in Indiana right now is absolutely wild. And trust me, you're going to want every update. So here's the deal. Caitlin Clark just gave an interview that's lighting up the WNBA. She finally addressed being benched during a key game against the New York Liberty. And the reason behind it? Not what you'd expect. This wasn't about load management. This wasn't some late-game tactical decision. According to Clark, this move was all about control. Let me set the scene. It's the fourth quarter, and Clark is on fire, dishing out assists, racking up points, running the offense with confidence. Then she makes 2 back-to-back turnovers. And just like that, Stephanie White pulls her from the game. But here's where things really get interesting. Clark said White called it a learning moment. A learning moment. For Caitlin Clark, the same player who electrified college basketball, made logo threes routine, and set viewership records. And believe it or not, Clark actually smiled while talking about it. Why? Because she knows exactly what's going on. She even brought up a moment when she forced herself to hold back on one of her signature transition passes. Kelsey Mitchell was sprinting down the court, and Clark said she had to stop herself mid-play. She admitted she looked over at Coach White and said how difficult it was not to make that pass. That says a lot. This isn't just about a player being benched. It's about a coach trying to reshape a superstar into something she's not. Think about it. You've got one of the most dynamic rookies the league has ever seen. Someone who draws huge crowds, changes how the game is played, and brings energy to every court she steps on. And instead of embracing that, the coach is trying to mold her into a slower, more restrained version. It's like asking Steph Curry to stop pulling up from deep, or telling LeBron James to stay out of the paint. And here's the jaw-dropper. White was recently overheard on a hot mic saying Clark's time off due to injury was a blessing in disguise. A blessing? Your top player being unavailable is somehow good? White claimed it gave other players a chance to develop and made the team harder to predict. But let's be honest, how can losing your biggest star, your main draw, possibly be seen as a positive? Sources close to the situation say there's more to this story, that Stephanie White may feel threatened by the attention and influence Caitlin Clark commands. And it makes sense. Clark walks into a room and instantly becomes the focus. She speaks, people listen, she plays, the world watches. That's a lot of weight for any coach to deal with, especially if they feel their authority is being challenged. Enter Sophie Cunningham. Sophie, known for her grit and physical presence on the court, has unofficially become Clark's protector. After a recent game, she was overheard telling teammates, "Nobody messes with Kisi on my watch." And when asked about how she's feeling, in Indiana, she simply smiled and said she's happier now than she ever was in Phoenix, though she hinted there are still issues that need ironing out. Now, Sophie's not just a teammate, she's become something of a fan favorite. Her background is tough as nails. Black belt in Taekwondo at 6, high school football player, and now the muscle behind one of the league's biggest stars. Her social media following has exploded, and a lot of that is because fans see her as Clark's shield, the one person truly standing up for her while the coaching staff seems to hold her back. And speaking of that coaching system, it's clearly not working for Clark. She's admitted herself that she's having a hard time adapting. White favors a slower, more conservative offense, focused on half-court execution and risk reduction. Meanwhile, Clark thrives in fast-paced, high-risk, high-reward situations, full-court dimes, quick trigger threes, transition chaos, trying to fit her into White's system. It's like putting a turbo engine into a golf cart. Here's the real kicker. Clark confessed that once she finds her rhythm from deep, she tunes out White entirely. She said if she drains 2 threes in a row, she's definitely taking a third. Whether the coach likes it or not, let that sink in. A player admitting she ignores the coach's instructions during games? That's not just frustration. That's a red flag about the relationship behind the scenes. Now add in the injuries. Clark has already missed 11 games this season due to 3 different injuries. And every time she returns, it seems like there's even more friction about how she's supposed to play. Her latest injury, a groin strain, has kept her out, longer than expected. And again, White calling that absence a blessing hasn't exactly helped morale. Want proof of the disconnect? Look at her first game back, against the Golden State Valkyries. The Fever got destroyed, 80-61. Clark shot 4 of 12. And after the game, White blamed the loss on poor focus and players not knowing the game plan. But how are they supposed to follow a game plan that stifles what they do best? Let's rewind to Clark's college days. Under Lisa Bluter at Iowa, she was unstoppable, averaging over 28 points, firing jaw-dropping passes, pulling up from 35 feet. Now, her stats are down, her shooting's off, and she's flat out said it's hard. Not to make the passes she wants to make. That's not growth. That's regression, and fans know it. Social media is on fire with criticism of White. One comment summed it up. Free Caitlin Clark from this system. Another wrote, Stephanie White is clearly threatened by Clark's star power. The message is loud and clear. People are not buying what's happening in Indiana, and this all raises serious questions about the team's future. A star player and head coach clashing over how the game should be played? A player tuning out her coach? A coach calling her best player's injury a good thing? This isn't sustainable. To her credit, Sophie Cunningham has been trying to play peacemaker, talking to both sides, trying to create a bridge. But when a role player is forced to mediate between the head coach and the franchise player, you know things are off the rails. Now here's something most people haven't picked up on, but it matters. The Fever are 12-11 right now, just above 500. They're 5-5 in the games Clark didn't play. And while that's not awful, this team was built to compete for a title, especially with additions like Dewana Bonner and Natasha Howard. Instead, they're barely clinging to playoff position. And the sad part? When Clark is free to be herself, when she plays instinctively and with confidence, this team looks unbeatable. But those moments have been rare this season, largely because of a system that seems more focused on restriction than elevation. Need. One last example? In a recent game, Clark had a fast break with numbers. This is where she's elite. But instead of letting her operate, the play was halted, replaced with a set that ended in a bad mid-range shot. That's not basketball. That's basketball in handcuffs. It's hard not to draw parallels here, like when Mark Jackson was coaching the Warriors and tried to rein in Steph Curry. Then Steve Kerr took over and said, "Let Steph be Steph." The rest is history. So, the question is, will Indiana make that same leap? Because right now, Stephanie White seems unwilling to shift her style. She keeps preaching discipline, structure, and learning opportunities. But whose version of the right way are we talking about? Because the millions tuning in to watch Caitlin Clark aren't here for outdated, risk-free basketball. They want to see the magic, the flair, the vision, the long-range bombs. And according to Sophie Cunningham, the Fever are still, quote, figuring things out. Sophie Cunningham recently made a statement that stuck with a lot of fans. The team is still working through things, and that everyone needs to get on the same page. If you read between the lines, it's not hard to see who and what she's talking about. It's the disconnect between the players and the coaching direction. And here's the thing. When someone like Sophie, who's never backed down from a challenge, on or off the court, chooses her words carefully, that's a sign. This isn't just about basketball strategy. This is a sensitive, possibly volatile situation. Now let's factor in the injuries. Caitlin Clark's been in and out of the lineup all season. It's hard to find rhythm when you're sidelined every few weeks. Just as she starts to get into a groove, boom, another setback. Nobody's saying there's anything shady going on with her health, but when your head coach describes your absence as a blessing, it raises eyebrows. It affects team morale, and it absolutely impacts the mental side of the game. Put yourself in Caitlin's shoes. You've just wrapped one of the greatest college basketball careers in history. You're bringing national buzz to the WNBA. You're the centerpiece of an entire franchise. And yet, you're being told that the very style of play that made you great isn't welcome here. That messes with your confidence. That makes you question the very foundation of your success. But here's the silver lining. Caitlin Clark is a competitor, first and foremost. She's not going to fade quietly into the background. The fact that she's now publicly opening up about the frustrations, even admitting that she tunes out her coach at times, that's not recklessness. That's resistance. That's someone standing up for who they are as a player. And the fact that Sophie Cunningham has her back, that matters a lot. Sophie isn't just gaining popularity for her defense and hustle. She's earning love from fans because she embodies everything Fever supporters want: grit, loyalty, and a no-nonsense attitude. She's not just defending Clark physically, she's standing up for her freedom to play the game her way. When Sophie says she's happier in Indiana than she ever was in Phoenix, it's partly because she's on a team with a generational talent. But that joy is now being threatened by internal tension. And you can bet the front office is watching all of this very closely. They've invested everything in Caitlin Clark. She's the one selling out arenas. She's the reason jerseys are flying off shelves. She's the headline. And if this disconnect with the coaching staff continues, what happens when her contract is up? Does she stay with a team that doesn't fully embrace her? Or does she look elsewhere, somewhere that lets her be herself on the court? Now, some people might be thinking, well, maybe Stephanie White has a point. Maybe Clark needs to learn structure, needs to adjust to a pro system. Fair, basketball is a team sport, but there's a difference between team play and stifling a player's core identity. What's happening here isn't development, it's restraint. It's diminishing a player's impact to make them fit into a rigid mold. And here's something important. Players are noticing. Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, they've made comments like, "We need to play faster," or "We should use our athleticism more." That's not random chatter. That's code for, let Caitlin be Caitlin. Here's the part that almost no one's discussing, but it might be the most crucial of all. The WNBA is in the middle of a major growth moment. TV ratings are climbing, ticket sales are booming, the energy is real. And players like Caitlin Clark are a massive part of that. If coaches like Stephanie White insist on taking those stars and forcing them into systems that ignore their brilliance, what happens to all the momentum? What happens to the fans who showed up to see the highlight plays, the long threes, the flashy passes? Sophie Cunningham gets it. She's been in the league long enough to understand that the WNBA's growth depends on stars, not just solid systems. Stars who entertain, stars who inspire, stars who push the game forward, and that's why she's standing by Caitlin Clark. Not just as a teammate, but as someone who understands what's at stake. Sophie Cunningham isn't just backing Caitlin. Clark as a teammate, she understands what Caitlin represents for the future of women's basketball. This situation, it's headed for a breaking point and fast. You can't operate with this kind of tension between a star player and the coaching staff and still expect to win at the highest level. At some point, a decision has to be made. Either Stephanie White adjusts her coaching style to highlight her most valuable asset, or the Fever leadership will need to make a change from the top. And let's be honest, Caitlin Clark is the face of the franchise. Stephanie White? She's the coach, a role that's replaceable in the grand scheme. The choice seems pretty clear. Until then, though, we're going to keep seeing these awkward moments. Clark getting pulled for playing instinctively, the same learning moment speeches, the same frustrating quotes about discipline and structure. Meanwhile, one of the most electrifying athletes in the sport is being held back by someone who appears more focused on control than creativity, or winning. But here's the thing. Caitlin Clark is too talented to stay boxed in. At some point, her game is going to break through, because you can't contain greatness forever. And when that moment comes, the WNBA better watch out. Because if Clark is allowed to fully be herself, to play her game the way it was meant to be played, the Indiana Fever won't just be good. They'll be a powerhouse. And you can bet Sophie Cunningham will be right there beside her, backing her up, protecting her, lifting her up. Because that's what real teammates do. That's what leaders do. And that's why Fever fans are rallying behind both of them, not just for their skills, but for their loyalty, their heart, and their refusal to settle. So now the big questions. What happens next? Will Coach White finally recognize what she has in Clark and let her loose? Will the front office intervene to protect the future of the franchise? Or will this internal battle keep boiling until something or someone has to give? What's clear is this: the story's far from over, and the next few weeks, they could define the future of the Indiana Fever, and maybe even the direction of the entire WNBA. Before you head out, hit that like button if you believe Caitlin Clark should be free to play her game. Drop a comment and let us know, should the Fever consider a coaching change? Or is White right to demand more structure? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this situation is changing quickly, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Until then, keep showing love for Caitlin Clark. Some players aren't meant to be managed. They're meant to be unleashed.